And we're live. Well, welcome back to the Bell's Club podcast. I'm your host, David Bell. And on this episode, we're going to take a look at round 5 of the 2025 F1 World Championship, with this week's Grand Prix being held at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit in Saudi Arabia. Now, let's get ready for those 5 green lights and we'll be underway. Now, let's kick this episode off by looking at FP1. So, at the start of the session in FP1, it looked like Ollie Berman had a decent lockup as he locked both of his front wheels, and it looked like due to that lockup, he tapped both his right front and rear off the wall, but the car itself wasn't actually damaged, and he was actually able to finish the session with relatively no other issues other than just minor scrapes, dents, and a ding in his pride, I guess. Then, other than kind of Ollie's issue earlier in the session, the rest of the session itself kind of went uneventful, or was uneventful, with the top 3 drivers of that session being Gasly in P1, Norris in P2, then Leclerc in P3. And before even FP2 started, Bortoletto's car had to be completely stripped down, which some of the broadcast cameras kind of were focused on and kind of covered. But it looked like the chassis needed to be changed because of a fuel leak, which unfortunately meant that he was ruled out for the rest of that FP2 session. Then the kind of incidents within FP2 that were of like flag worthy was the first yellow flag being waved at Lance Stroll as he spun his Aston 360 on the approach to turn 1 by, it looks like, locking both of his rear wheels and just kicking the ass out from underneath him. Then race control had noted that Lewis Hamilton was impeding Alex Albon while it looked like he was on a push lap, which the incident itself will be investigated later in that session, so we'll talk about that literally in a few minutes. Then, as we'll kind of talk further as we go further into this week's episode, this week just really wasn't Yuki Tsunoda's week or weekend, as the big drama from the FP2 session was when Yuki crashed his Red Bull and brought out a red flag, which it looked like he tapped his front left wheel on the inside of the wall at turn 27, which it looked like it broke something on the front left wheel, and because of this, he couldn't turn his car, and he headed straight for the other side of the wall at turn 27. And with that, the session, was within the last 10 minutes, and that red flag basically ended the FP2 session early. Then, other than that, there were really no issues other than some other drivers tapping walls or complaining about actually their car kind of bouncing as they go along, kind of like porpoising as they go down the track. But at the end of the session, our top 3 drivers were Norris in P1, Piastri in P2, and Verstappen in P3. Then, moving on to our FP3 session, which itself was just a fucking boring-ass session, with nothing really notable happening on track other than kind of drivers, again, brushing up against walls or cutting it close, especially in turn 27 where Yuki crashed the following day. But it's the same old story. McLaren just absolutely dominating on the top of the timetables, with Norris in P1 again, Piastri in P2 again. Then finally, had a bit of a change-up in P3 with Russell in P3. Then later that day, on the Saturday, we moved on to qualifying with our first session of Q1. Now, during this session, it was more of the same as the FP3 session earlier that day, with just a few real incidents that bringing out kind of flags or bringing out cautions for people, with one of them being Hadjar on the exit of the last corner, which again, he was cutting it close with the wall and actually give it a wee bit of a love tap with his rear wheels. But as the same with most of the drivers, they were just kind of scrapes, kind of dents, scuffs on the car, but no actual damage done to the car itself. But even during that session, it was on Bortoletto again, which he kind of drew everybody's attention as he lost the rear of his car and spun his car 180. But kind of the same as Yuki's kind of set running in even the free practice sessions, because it was so close to the end of the session. During that spin, it immediately dropped him down to P20 for the race on Sunday. Then finally, at the end of Q1, we lost 5 drivers, with those being Stroll, Doohan, Hulkenberg, Ocon, and again, Bortoleto. Then on to Q2. So right off the start from the second quali session, Lawson was noticed for an unsafe release from his pit box, but later in the session, the actual stewards of the race noted that they weren't basically going to do any further investigation into that matter. But Saturday itself was, from like a fan's point of view, it was just a fucking shit day overall. When nothing much happened, it was, I mean, from fans, we kind of want to see action. Either drivers kind of cutting it close to each other, overtaking when they frankly shouldn't. But it was just a straightforward racing weekend. No real issues, nothing major to kind of report. But at the end of Q2, we did lose another 5 drivers, with Albon, Lawson, Alonso, Hadjar, and Berman. Now, looking at the actual Q3 session, kind of track back in a wee bit, kind of just talking shit on what I literally just said. With the final session of qualifying was actually one of the more entertaining sessions, with around 8 minutes left on the timer. The session was actually red flagged as the championship leader, Lando Norris, crashed his McLaren into the wall. Now, from the onboard footage, it looked like he put his car a little bit wide as he was going over the curbing, which even saw his car kind of snapped to the right, and as he tried to correct it, he just lost control of his car and smashed straight into the wall, which fucked up the left side of his car. But thankfully, all of the damage that was sustained during that crash was repairable, and he was able to take part in Sunday's race, but unfortunately for him, it was a starting position of 10th. And that brings us to the end of our qualifying session for the Saudi Grand Prix, with Max Verstappen on pole with a time of 1 minute 27 seconds, 0.294, which, I might add, is a new track record around Jeddah, but McLaren themselves were finished in P2 with Oscar and Russell in P3. Now, thankfully, all that every F1 fan wants to see is some actual contact during a race, especially during the open laps, as there was major contact between Gasly and Yuki again, which, as previously stated, this weekend just was not meant to be for wee Yuki. As they collided during the opening lap, which brought out the safety car. And even if you seen on track that Gasly's car was completely fucking smashed to pieces. But Yuki, it looked like he only had a bit of damage on the rear end, probably mainly around his rear wing, which you seen him kind of limp back to his garage. But after him sitting in the garage for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, you just heard the engine shut off, and you know it was his race done for the day. And even with the damage to his rear wing, you noticed it's not something that's obviously can't be repaired or replaced during the race itself. So other than that kind of crash on the opening lap of the race, there was only kind of minor issues that kind of flared up during the race, like the incident between Max Verstappen and Piastri, which Max Verstappen came off the worser for while receiving a 5-second time penalty for that actual incident into turn 1. Then Bortoleto again was kind of shown the black and white flag for unsportsmanlike conduct as he moved on the braking, which almost put Alonso into the wall, which was and is kind of awkward, seeing that Alonso is Bortoleto's manager. So I'm sure that wouldn't have been a very hospitable manager meeting if it actually did crash out Alonso, even if both of them were wiped out. Then Lawson himself also received a time penalty, but this time it was actually for 10 seconds after leaving the track and gaining an advantage with his tussle with Jack Doohan. Then at the end of the Saudi Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri wins, which marks his 5th career win overall and his 3rd win this season. Now, with that win today, it launches him into the lead of the Drivers' Championship with 99 points, which puts him ahead of his teammate Lando Norris in P2 with 89 points. Now, this race saw Max Verstappen in P2 and Leclerc in P3, which is best finish this season so far. But thankfully, or hopefully, there's going to be more to come with either Hamilton or Leclerc. Then, in terms of the Constructors' Championship, now when we're looking at, say, the top 3 teams, nothing really has changed in terms of their position, as McLaren still lead with 188 points, followed up by Mercedes in second with 111 points, and Red Bull in P3 with 89 points. So, for this week's kind of learning F1 section, we're going to take a look at what a safety car is and what a virtual safety car is, and we'll also kind of learn what they actually do. So, the full safety car is deployed onto the track when there's an incident or if there's like debris on the track. It can also be deployed in bad weather conditions as well. So realistically, the overall idea behind the safety car is to slow the actual F1 cars down or the race cars down by leading them from the front of the grid, while the marshals kind of clean up around the track or remove the stricken or damaged car off the track as well. Now, the idea with the actual safety car themselves play into the team's strategies, who actually take those into consideration or kind of trying to predict when safety cars could be deployed, as the actual race cars can pit under a safety car, which could result in a kind of major advantage to their race results. And kind of the best way to look at advantages gained by safety cars is we just literally need to look at the Abu Dhabi GP back in 2021, and we kind of all know what happened back then. Then, with the virtual safety car, or the VSC, follows the same overall concept. Instead of having a physical safety car being deployed onto the track, there are kind of panels or kind of light panels that are posted up all around the track that notify when a safety car is actually being deployed. But without the actual physical safety car out in front of the pack, the drivers still have to follow the same rules as a full safety car, in terms of they need to slow down for not only their own safety, but to allow, again, the marshals to clean up any debris that have fallen off wings or any stricken cars. But if there's mainly like a car out on track, that would be a full safety car would be deployed in that situation. And if there's any driver that fail to follow these safety car rules, they can receive penalties that could be issued to the drivers themselves. Then, with the safety car itself, is always kind of split between two like manufacturers of cars. It can either be Aston Martin, like we saw in Saudi, or split between the Mercedes AMG as well. It really just depended upon the actual track. But ever since 2000, the driver of the safety car has always been the same driver, and it's always been Brand Maylander. And that will bring us to the end of this week's episode of the Bell Scott Podcast. I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and feel free to follow us here on wherever you get your podcasts. And I look forward to talking to you all for, I would usually say next week, but it won't be next week because we have a bit of a break in between now and Miami. But I look forward to talking to you all around the start of May for the Miami Grand Prix. Bye, everybody.